Well, we're finishing up our series today called Blueprint. And we're in this series, what we've been talking about is for the beginning of the year to go back to some of the foundational truths in different aspects of our life and make sure we have strong foundations. You know, I was driving this past week by IU West Hospital over here, and if you've seen it, how many have seen that big crane sitting up on top of it? Yeah, they're actually going to build up another floor or two to the hospital. And I was thinking about that, and I thought how much work that architect must have had to put into that to make sure that that building not only supported a couple floors, but maybe a couple more. They had to dig deeper. Those foundations had to be so secure down in bedrock so that as they built on top of the hospital, it would stand and be strong. And it's the same way with our lives. We need strong foundations in our life so that when winds and waves and all kinds of disasters in life come against us, sickness, job loss, whatever it might be, relational issues, when these things come against us, if we have a strong foundation in God, we're going to survive them. If we don't, Jesus said it's like the person who builds their house, their life on the rock or sand. And I've seen so many people that love God with all their heart, but they just didn't build certain foundations in their life. And it's tough. It's tough to have to go and jack up your life and go in and build a foundation and lay a foundation on the run. But we're going to talk about that today. Now, today, if you came and you're new here or you brought a friend here, it's that day. I'm talking about money. You know, because you get your friend to finally come to church and he talks about money. He never talks about money. We don't pass offering plates. Today he talks about money. What I really want to talk to you today about is God's design for this, because it's pretty clear, and God calls us to be a generous people. Now, I understand why we get all squirmy talking about money in church, because money is emotional. It really is. When you got up this week, say Tuesday, Wednesday, when it was so nasty outside and the snow was falling and the streets had snow all over them and you were dreading having to go to work and, you know, you put your life out there. You give your life in exchange for that check on Friday or whenever it comes. That's what you do. So when you get that check, that money that you've made that week represents your security. It represents an exchange of your strength, your time, your life. And that's why money is so emotional. And for a lot of us, it's a struggle. So when we start talking about money in church and we're already thinking about all the other obligations we have, the last thing we want to hear is how we should be more generous. But what I want to share with you today is how, if you get these in the right place, God has an incredible plan and way to take care of you and take this pressure off of your life. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, if you have the YouVersion app, you can bring that up, or you can just type in this address in your just type that URL in, and that'll take you there too, and you can follow along with all the scriptures and notes and everything. You can make your own notes as well. We haven't used YouVersion for a while, and we're getting back into it because I think it's a great tool. So I'm going to start with a couple of statements that Jesus made, because Jesus kind of sets the pace for our lives, doesn't he? I mean, we're followers of Jesus. He gave his life for us, and in exchange, he asks us to give our life to him, to live for him. And Jesus had something to say about money. In fact, he had a lot to say about money. Over half of Jesus' parables were about money. Jesus spoke more about money and finances than he did heaven or hell or prayer. He knew that this was going to test our heart. And money does. I mean, you can say, I really love God, but we don't really give. Well, we sort of give. We sort of trust God. It's like being sort of married, sort of pregnant. You know, you either are or you aren't. We either trust God in this area or we don't. And I think this is one of the biggest areas of struggle. And because we don't face it, because we don't bring it right out in front of us and settle it, it really keeps us in this place where we can't live up to what God really wants for us. So today, I believe that many of you are just going to get a new understanding. Revelation's going to come. And you're going to leave here trusting God in a new way. So Jesus said in Luke 16, he said, one who is faithful in very little is also faithful with much. And the one who's dishonest with very little is dishonest with much. If then you have not been faithful with unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you with true riches? So this is a question that Jesus is asking his audience about being faithful. If you're just a consumer and you're not a giver, if you're not faithful with that which is another's, and what he's referring to here is you're not faithful with that which is God's, and what God has entrusted to you. If we're not faithful with that, if we're not generous with that, then God stops that flow from him to us out, and then the cycle continues. Now, I don't think riches here, true riches, is more money, unless giving is your gift, and then God uses that to bless others and so on. I think he takes care of us. But I think the true riches here are much more eternal. I believe it's God's presence. It's that relationship with him. It's his power flowing through our lives. It's his gifts in operation in us. Those are the true riches. I've been with rich people as they died. And not one of them was looking at their checkbook. Not one of them was looking at their stock portfolio. They were thinking about their family. They were thinking about eternity. They were thinking about how they spent their life. Jesus goes on to say in verse 12, he says, and if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give to you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he'll hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. We just can't. So money is part of the package. The resources we have belong to God. When we give our life to God, we give him the entirety of our life. I love this cartoon. It demonstrates the dilemma. You get the idea. God, I want all of you. I want to be baptized and consecrated to you, except this part. Except my wallet. God calls for it all. And money is just one of those obvious tests. Now, Jesus spoke these words to his disciples, but there was a group of church people. I mean, really devoted church people. The most religious people of the day, the Pharisees. And this is how they responded to Jesus when he says you can't serve God and money. He says the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all these things. They ridiculed him. And he said to them, you are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your heart. God's always looking at the heart. We can say, yes, I serve God and we're Christians and we go to church. But then God goes deeper. He gets into those real motives, those issues of trust and faith. He says, for what is exalted among men is an abomination in the sight of God. Isn't it crazy how our world celebrates stuff that's so temporal or so unimportant? What kind of car you drive, how big of a house you have, how much jewelry you wear, what designer whatever you've got. And there's constantly this pressure on us to comply with that, to live for that, to let that be our standard. And that is far from the kingdom of God. In fact, Jesus said it's an abomination. There's nothing wrong with having nice stuff. But when you have to have that stuff to feel significant, when your sense of worth is tied to stuff, you'll never have enough. You'll never feel like your life is of value. I know some of the poorest people that they're just lovers of God. They don't have a lot, but they are so secure in God's love. If you gave them a bunch of money, they'd just give it away. because that's their heart. They've learned that secret, that it's not what you have that makes you content. It's who you are and your relationship with God. We are called to be generous people, not because of what we have or don't have, but because it's the nature of God. God is a generous God, isn't He? Yes, He is. He's a generous God. He demonstrated that in giving His own life for us. And every time we're generous, we're displaying the heart of God that's inside of us. We're giving as an act of worship. We're saying, God, you've given so much. I'm going to bless this person. I'm going to do this. I'm going to give to this. I'm going to give my time maybe. I'm going to give my resources to this over here. Because as you do, you're declaring how good God is and how much you trust in Him. And this is where I think that the world needs to see the church in action. I think that we really struggle with that. I think caring for the poor, loving people well, sharing our lives and resources with one another, how the New Testament church did it. It was their closeness. It was their love for people that were far from God that just caused that church to explode. And somehow we've allowed it to be more about us, and we've become more consumers than we are generous givers. So we have to renew our mind in this area. And I want to just go through a passage here, about 4 or 5 verses that Paul uses when he's writing to the Corinthian church about giving and mostly about generosity. And he says these words. This is in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Paul says the point is this. Now he's talked to them for a whole 2 chapters about this offering that he wants them to give. And boy, he's in their face. You know, ever have a minister be in your face about giving, you know? The only time I really get in people's face about giving is when we're talking about giving to the poor or something, or there's this incredible opportunity. I'll challenge you to give to that. And y'all are so faithful and do. But Paul is saying, look, these saints, these Christians in Jerusalem, they're starving. We got to raise money for them. So he spent 2 chapters talking about their generosity and their heart and everything. And finally he gets down and he summarizes all of his argument and all of his appeal in these few verses. And he says this, the point is this. Let's just summarize it right here. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves what? Cheerful giver. You know? So when we have the opportunity to give at the end of the service, when you have the opportunity to bless somebody or something, it should always be joyfully. It shouldn't be reluctantly. It shouldn't be because somebody twisted your arm. It's one of the reasons we don't pass plates here on a Sunday morning. We don't want you to feel compelled, like obligated to give. If you want to give, give. It's about what God's doing in your heart at the time. It's that level of trust. And I love that Paul uses an illustration here that we in Indiana get. Farming. He says, you sow little, you harvest little. Now that's pretty simple, isn't it? If I just sow a little, I only get a little. If I sow a lot, I get to receive more, so I can be even more generous. That's the whole point. Years ago, Lori and I were campus pastors at Western Illinois University over in Macomb, Illinois. And while we were there, it was summer, the students were away, and I said, I'm going to plant a garden. I grew up in the city of St. Louis, so I hadn't been around that much dirt, except like city dirt. It's mostly concrete, you know. And so I decided to grow a garden, and mostly because I love tomatoes. Don't you love fresh tomatoes? I'm not talking about those pink spongy things that you get at the store. They even leave it on the vine now, like somehow that's going to make it look like a real tomato. They aren't fooling anybody. That thing came out of some chemical plant somewhere. But you know, I mean, off the vine, a big red juicy tomato. Oh, I love that. And so I thought, I want tomatoes. And I want tomatoes every day. So I put out 36 plants. You're ahead of me. You have more gardening experience than I do. We sowed a lot. Guess what we got? A lot of tomatoes. We had hundreds of tomatoes, like every day. I was bringing in these laundry baskets full of tomatoes. Look, honey, more tomatoes. And she pointed to the other 2 laundry baskets from the day before. I was like, what are we going to do with this? And we're in a farming community. They've got their own tomatoes. Nobody wanted them. So it's like we canned them, we made sauce, tomato soup, we ate tomatoes. It's just finally, we just couldn't eat anymore. We just had to let them die on the vine because there just wasn't an outlet for it. Now, that's where the illustration kind of breaks down. Because no matter how much you sow and how much God blesses you with, again, there's always places to give. There's always opportunities. But if we sow little, we reap little. Jesus said it in the same way to his disciples. This is how Jesus said it. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your lap. In other words, as you give seed or grain to other people, they're going to give back to you, and you're going to have to take your tunic and put it like this, and they're going to pour into it, and you're going to have to press it down and shake it to get every spare bit of room in there because it's just going to be spilling off the sides. This is what Jesus said. For with the measure, here's the key, with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. The measure that we use determines what we get back. So with some people, they live their life, dig this out, with a little spoon. Well, we have an opportunity to give. And they go through and, nope, not that one. Here's something for God. I'll tip God. I'll help this person. This really won't help them, but it'll help my conscience, and I'll still be fine. They give with a spoon. They live life with a spoon. And these are the same people that complain because they never get ahead. Now, like I said, this is not an amount. This is about what sacrifice through our lives are we giving. Sometimes it is our time. Other times it is a talent. But other times it's just our money. And we live life with a spoon. And if you're living life and it seems like you never get ahead and you never get to go forward, look at how much is going out. And are you giving with a spoon? Now, the other option is you can live life with a shovel. Now, I don't know about you, but I like to give with this and get with that. Right? I mean, isn't that how we want it to be? I want to give with this and get this. I want to make sure I can afford it, that it's not costing me too much, but I want a whole lot more back. And God doesn't do it that way. Why? Because if He kept giving to us with this, and we just kept using this, it'd be like our tomatoes. It would just not be used for God's kingdom. We'd just consume it on ourselves, and actually, it would distract us from God. So I want to give with this so I can receive with this. Heard an old missionary say years ago, he said it this way, he says, we've got two hands. One hand to receive, one hand to give. As the money passes through, there's plenty for you. And we've always tried to keep that in mind, Lori and I, as we've looked at opportunities to give and so on. There's too much uncertainty in our world today to put our trust in ourselves. A lot of the stress we have is because we don't trust God. We worry about our job, our finances, our career, our investments. What's funny to me is people that have savings, and then all of a sudden they'll go through a little crisis and have to spend their savings. And then they come to me and go, Pastor, it's just so tough. I go, what's going on? we've had to tap into our emergency fund. And I go, yeah? And they go, well, we don't want to do that. And I go, that's why it's there. Be happy. You get the Dave Ramsey badge. You had an emergency fund. You know, that's what it's there for. Your savings are there. It is the rainy day. Use it for that. Be happy. Rejoice that you have the resources to be able to do that. Here's what happens with us. I think that we fall in this trap and we take one of three perspectives toward giving. Let me go through these real quick. First of all, when the opportunity to give arrives, I'm not just talking about in church. Don't limit this to just church. I'm talking about just any opportunity that you feel prompted to help somebody with, whatever it might be. And I think the first thing we do is we immediately take an inventory in our mind, and then we tell ourselves that we can't give or give that much. And that's rejection. We just either reject or ignore what God may be prompting us to do because we reason it out in our head, and we go, and in our head we become the final authority instead of God. So we say, well, we just tell ourselves, I can't afford to do that. I've got to take care of my family. We've got these bills to pay. Maybe in the future sometime. Oh, when I have a lot of money, I'm going to give. Someday I'm going to be a millionaire and I'm going to give so much money away. If you're not giving it when you're poor, you'll never give it when you're rich. That's just reality. I've watched people gain success and have a lot of success and raise a lot of wealth very quickly in their lives. It did not make them givers. They just became more consumers because they had earned this, they deserved this, and more and more and more. So this person who's telling themselves, they're disqualifying any faith in their life. Nope, can't do it, period, boom. Ignore it, rationalize it, push it away. The second kind of level or place that people get to, and these are a lot of church people, is they give out of obligation. And they ask themselves what I can afford. What can I afford? See? That's obligated givers. They look at what they have and they feel like this is mine. What can I afford to give out of this? There's no faith there. They're just looking at their resources and saying, this is what I think is rational. The Bible and living by faith is seldom rational. It really is. I mean, it's just all backwards and upside down in this kingdom. We die to live. We give to receive. We take a position of service to be elevated to leadership. It's just completely opposed to the thinking of our culture, which says grab, promote, get to the top, fight for your way, be self-made. That's what the message that's bombarding your minds all the time. And this goes against that. And that's why we've got to renew our mind with these truths. And the person who is just asking themselves, what happens is they start to look at what they have, and then fear and selfishness tend to step in, self-preservation. And they go, oh, I'd like to give more. Boy, God knows my heart. I'd sure like to, but this is what I feel, what I think I can do. Well, that sounds nice and it sounds compassionate, but it's not a life of faith, because the highest way we can live is the awakened giver, the one who understands who God is and how generous He is. And their perspective is not telling themselves what they can do or can't do. They're not asking themselves. Now they're asking God. God, everything in my hand is from you. What of it do you want me to give away? It's like you're carrying around God's wallet. Think about that. How would you like to be the person? I thought it'd be kind of a cool job. I want to be the guy from Publishers Clearinghouse that actually goes to the door, knocks on it, and they open it and go, "You're a millionaire! Yay! Let's go to the next house." That'd be a fun job. Just giving away somebody else's money. That is how a cheerful giver views the resources in their hands from God. Hey, this is what I've got. God, what do you want me to give? It's all yours anyway. Give all of it? Okay. Now, there's been several times Lori and I have literally looked at each other and there was an opportunity to give. And like we were afraid to look at each other. And when we did, I said, we're supposed to give it all. She goes, phew, good. What we've determined over the years is if we get two different amounts, we always go with the higher one. We always go with the one that has more faith. Sometimes it's Lori. You know, I always tell people that. If you get two amounts, the bigger one's always God, the lower one's always the devil. So, how much do we get to bless? You know, one quick story. I'll start to wrap this up. One of my favorite stories of that kind of awakened giver, and I was reading this the other day, and I didn't really connect them, and I went, oh, that's the perfect story to illustrate that. There's a lot of sacrificial giving in the Bible. One story I think gets overlooked at times. Remember when Jesus fed the 5,000? You know, they take the fish and bread, and he prays and gives it to the disciples as they're giving. There's just more and more and more, and we celebrate what an incredible miracle. And all four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all tell that story. But John gives us a bit of detail in John 6 that the others don't. And that was the source of that lunch that day. And it belonged to a little boy. That little boy gave his lunch to Jesus. Said, you need food? Here's everything I have. What an incredible hero he became. It was his giving that generated the miracle. It was because Jesus had something to work with, a little boy that gave it all. Maybe it was because of his incredible generosity that was able to be spread that far. I was thinking about this too. The disciples, they didn't have any food. 5,000 people there. Nobody had a sandwich to share. I mean, not an extra fish, some Tic Tacs in their pocket, nothing. I mean, nobody had anything to contribute. If they did, they're all going, oh no, I don't have anything, you know. They're trying to get it down because that's our tendency. But one little boy, and little kids are hungry all the time. We have 2 grandkids. They just eat nonstop. You know he was probably hungry, but he just trusted. He was just had so much childlike faith. Jesus, here's my meal. Go for it. He becomes, I believe, the hero. And I'm sure the disciples looked at it and went, oh, isn't that cute? You know, when your kids feel like giving to something, don't diminish the faith, the step of faith that they're taking. When they're praying for something, you agree with them. Because it's their faith, that childlike faith, that may be where the breakthrough comes. So Paul goes on, he says, and God's able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. He has distributed freely. He has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. That's what people are going to say about you. That's what God's going to declare about you. Paul is using this word a lot, all. Look, he's able to make all grace abound to you, so having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. What do you think Paul's saying there? I double dog dare you to give. Come on, man, get in on this. Do this. Paul is offering a guarantee here. He's saying you're not going to outgive God. You've got to take this risk. You've got to do this. If you do, God is going to unleash His grace and His blessings upon your life. He finishes with this verse. He wraps it up with this. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. Okay? So this is pretty simple. What's that? Bread. What's bread for? Eating. Yeah, it's not real complicated. This is the only pack of seed available in Indianapolis right now. If you had to go looking for seed, this is actually sunflower seeds. What are seeds for? Sowing. Yeah. This is not real complicated. What's this for? Sowing. Good. You get it. Here's another big one. This produces this. But here's the problem that we run into. We look at what we have in our hand, and it's all bread. Because this fills us up. This is like way future. This you have to wait on. This you can't eat. But this you can. And when you see everything in your hand as bread, you're not going to give that away because that's for eating. But God says what you really have in your hand is seed. You say, nope, I don't have seed. I don't have anything I can give with. I don't have any extra. Then God's a liar. Because the Bible says God provides to you seed for sowing, and then He provides bread for eating. You get the seed, He provides the bread. See how that works? People say, well, how do I know what's seed and what's bread? Seed's always the first portion. The first portion, when you get paid, the first thing you should do is give. Because you are saying, God, you're the most important thing in my life. Everything I have comes from you, and therefore I'm giving back to you a portion of what I've received. I'm establishing from the very beginning that this is the priority in my life, that I am going to be a giver. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to be sowing this seed, and then I get to consume this. I can rest at night when I've sown this, knowing that this is going to be produced. See, I have noticed, and one of the things that one of the sad realities of poverty is you start thinking shorter and shorter and shorter. We get people call the church, Pastor, we need help. We don't have a place to stay tonight. Could you pay for our hotel room? It's only $60, $50, whatever. I go, okay, so what's your plan for tomorrow night? Well, we don't know yet. So basically, this is going to sustain you for 24 hours and that's it, until something else comes along. And they go, yeah, that's the logic, because in that moment, that's all they can think of. They have to think of, where am I going to stay tonight? Now, what we try to do is help people in that situation. We don't always provide the housing. We provide them with resources and places where they can stay in town and so on. But the goal is to help them to have a bigger picture. When people come in church and they need counseling because they're in a financial crisis, I'll ask them, well, tell me about your giving. And they go, whoa, that's a little private, Pastor. Well, you told me about your bills. Let's talk about your giving. Well, we can't afford it. There's that thinking again. We can't afford it. Well, I've looked at what I have. I can't give. Okay, I'm going to give you $20. What are you going to give back? Are you kidding? I need every one of those dollars. No, part of it's seed. If you don't sow seed and you don't wait, God, and I believe when you sow the seed, I think God has a way of making bread spring up real quick. I just do. I think God obligates Himself when we become givers to take care of us. And so I'm making an appeal to you today. Take a risk. Trust God. One of the things that we put in our program, and it's been there since we started this church almost 13 years ago, is our tithe challenge. We say start there. It's a good place. You see it going all the way back to Abraham. You see Jesus endorsing the tithe, the New Testament. It's a good place to start. We say take the risk. Give a tithe of your income, 10% for 90 days, and see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll give you your money back. Why would you do that? Because we feel like that if you Like if I go buy a TV from Best Buy, and it's a Sony TV, and I go there and say, this TV's not working, they go, well, go to Japan and take it up with Sony. I'd be disappointed with Best Buy. I'd probably look for someplace else to shop. So when we tell you, take the risk to give, we take that risk with you. We're willing to take that risk. And over the years, dozens and dozens of people have started by faith, just giving in that way. And never has one person come back. I guess I really want one person to do it at some point, just so we can say, we've given the money back. But we never have. Nobody's ever come back and said, this doesn't work. Whatever it might be. And like I said, I don't want to limit this to an amount or time or just money. But there's so much of our lives that the world out there needs to receive. There's so much of God in us. And unless they get to experience that life of God that's in us, unless they see that trust for God in us, how are they ever going to believe? When we that say we go to church and love God, when we don't live this out, when we don't trust God with our money, when we don't think that God's really going to take care of us, how can we ever say to them with integrity, God will take care of you? Can we really say we're trusting God with our eternity when we won't trust Him with our money? So my goal as a pastor, and believe me, there's a lot more fun topics to talk about, but this is real pastoral stuff here. This is me encouraging you as a father in this house to say, take the risk. Man, we'll pray with you, wherever you feel like you should give. And this week, truth's going to get tested in your life. You're going to get opportunities. I preached this out at Brownsburg last week, and Lori and I were just talking about last night. We were in the car and just saying how many opportunities we've had to give this week, and whether we've been obedient. And thankfully, we have. We want to model this. Here's the question. What part of your life does God own? It all, right? So let Him own this part. Let Him lead your life in this area. And then move from this obligated and have-to thing into a place of cheerful generosity. Watch what God does.